Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Mark Harris. He is the CEO and co founder at HeroWear. And HeroWear is focused on exosuits and helping enable workers to lift and move better and be able to do their jobs a little better and more safely as well, preventing those long-term injuries that often sometimes might just creep up on you a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about the exosuits, how they kind of came about, where this idea came from, how they fit into the warehousing industry. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how do you look at something like this and justify that ROI and be able to quantify and figure out how is this going to benefit you in the long term, which I think would be pretty interesting. So, Mark, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Good to be with you here today, Kevin.
Definitely happy to have you on here. Happy to talk to you. I've tried the exosuit previously at a trade show, so it's great to bring you on the podcast now and be able to talk
Excellent.
about it and hear the whole story behind it. So why don't you start, I guess, by telling us a little bit about your background and kind of where the idea for HeroWear came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I was originally a research scientist who determined I was more of
Mm,
a business guy at heart. So I switched over from actually cancer research into MBA program, and around that
right.
time started building businesses and just fell in love with entrepreneurship. I ended up actually working in the genetic testing industry and launching a company called Concert Genetics. I spent about
Mm,
12 years building that business in healthcare IT. And as that really started to scale and take off, I found a great business partner, brought him in, and kind of transitioned the leadership over to him so
mm,
I could go and build another one. And it was around that time, back in 2019, as I was looking for my next business to scale, where I came across my co-founders, Matt and Carl,
mm,
who were engineers at Vanderbilt University, and they had developed the prototype of this exosuit technology and were exploring commercial opportunities with that. And we joined forces to
mm.
spin the technology out of Vanderbilt and grow the business.
Mm. Very interesting, and I was curious about that actually because I was looking at your LinkedIn and I'm like, man, from like cancer research to these exosuits, like I'm curious, like how did like how did that happen?
Very
So
straight line, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, total natural progression, right? So yeah, it's very interesting to hear about that, and I think it's interesting to hear too, kind of how these exosuits came about. So I'm curious, like you mentioned your co-founders there were developing this from an engineering side. Where did they get the initial idea from, or think that this is something that the market would want to see?
Mhm. Yeah, so this really came about from something that was going on in Carl's life. So Carl runs a
Mm,
lab at Vandy where he does work on prosthetic limbs and reducing injury risks for a variety
right.
of different people, all in biomechanics research. But he had two small young children, and like a lot of first-time parents, he started getting back pain.
Mm,
And where his mind went was, how is this 20-pound person destroying my back? I'm young, I'm healthy, I work out, I don't get it. And so that took him on a journey of understanding the biomechanics of the back and how it really works.
mm,
And basically, he came back and he challenged his lab. He said, look, design me something that that is so low profile, I could wear this thing underneath my clothing and it would help offload my back
mm,
and reduce my risks of injury. So that was the core concept back in 2014, 2015, that they started developing off of and doing a whole host of research.
mm.
And that kind of core DNA of create something super low profile and lightweight is still with us here today.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is one thing I definitely noticed that it's low profile and lightweight when I tried it out and have seen it in the past. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I have a son too, and definitely I felt the same thing. Like, you get to that age where they still want to, be lifted up and carried. I was like, no, it's too much. You're too heavy at this point. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that that's kind of kind of where it came from. But I'm curious now. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of applications for this, a lot of different industries. I mean, even in like you mentioned, carrying baby in personal life, right? But tell us a little bit
Mhm.
about where you guys see the fit for hero wear within the warehousing industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we kind of brought together was that prototype and the sort of scientific and data that came out of Carl's lab, and Matt was there at the time as well, really driving the project
Hmm.
forward. But then what I was bringing was I had 12 years of experience uh, selling B2B to large enterprise healthcare clients, trying to understand their needs and
Mm,
bring first to market solutions to service those needs. And so, what immediately drew them to me was they had gone out to their first ever public presentation of this prototype technology. It was pretty janky at the time, but they had a number of inbounds from Fortune 500 companies saying, "Hey, we've
mm,
got a real problem here. Can we buy some of these?" And
yeah.
so that was the light bulb moment where we really recognized we need to join forces. So first thing I did was dive super deep into the space to understand like how pervasive are back problems, what types of industries could we roll this out into, and quite honestly, it blew my mind how
Mm,
many types of job applications there are. So we've run through full Bureau of Labor and Statistics data and broken down every type of occupation, and we
mm,
found over 30% of employed Americans' primary job task is lifting and leaning.
yeah.
So some of the markets we definitely focus today on logistics and manufacturing, but there's a
Hmm.
whole host of other interesting applications in construction and in healthcare, defense, etc. So we can kind of dig into any of those you're interested in, but
Yeah.
where warehouse came out and logistics and supply chain came out on top was simply because the volume of work, the repetitive nature, just the number of picks and the weight of those picks means those individuals are at very, very high risk for back injury. And
Mm.
it's just a really hard job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I think you hit it kind of on the nail on the head there. I guess with the repetitiveness is probably the biggest thing because even like some stuff like smaller boxes and stuff like that, you may not be thinking that it's having much of an impact, but if you're doing it over and over and over again, 100 times a day or more, it is going to have that lasting impact, especially if you're doing it with not the proper lifting techniques or reaching in certain way, or it's not the most ergonomic design and things like that. So and a lot of times too, and I've certainly had this happen to me, working in warehouses, is you look at a box and it's a lot heavier than you were expecting it to be originally, right? So you would love to have some kind of support or something there to help you quickly adjust and adapt to that. So it's very interesting, and I think it's such a great thing. But let's talk a little bit about kind of that problem that's out there. Like,
Mhm.
how, when you guys look at this and you look at the market data and you see what's happening, how, I mean, how serious are workplace injuries from like an employee morale perspective, employee well-being perspective, and then how serious and impactful are they to the company's bottom line and overall operations?
hmm So the high level statistics are you're talking between 100 and 150 billion dollars a year is spent by U.S. employers on back injuries. So that's anything from medical
Wow.
claims to lost days of work, etc.
Hmm.
But we think about it beyond just injury prevention. That's kind of the core of why we got into this.
Yeah.
But what we found is just a top three problem right now in the space with the tight labor market is just a shortage of
Mm,
labor. So the questions our clients are grappling with is how do I recruit? How do I retain? How do I keep these folks healthy and happy and productive?
mm,
And so we look at this and we see often there's a massive amount of turnover in that first, call it 30 to 90 days when
Yeah.
somebody goes into one of these jobs, just because it's such a hard job. And they sort of realize, man, this is going to change my life. Like, I'm waking
Yeah.
up sore every day. So there is a injury reduction piece is a key part of our value prop, and we can talk more about that. But it's also employee retention. How can I help to offload some of that weight off their backs so that they come to work more refreshed? They can spend more time doing what they love because they're not,
Mhm.
having to collapse on the couch at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
then finally, if they're happier and healthier, they often move a few more boxes a day as well. So there's also a productivity piece of this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I think that's such a great point about the retention aspect to it as well, because I think it's not unknown to everybody that there's been some serious labor challenges in the past couple years, since COVID especially, and trying to get people in the door is a challenge in itself, and then trying to keep them inside in the door too is another challenge all on itself. So it is very important, like you said, to be able to have those tools and things to enable them to have a better work experience, right? Because especially now, and I've dealt with this a couple times too. We have people come in, and they've never worked in a warehouse before, right? And it's kind of like it's a little bit of a shock, like you said. It's like, wow, now I'm doing like heavy lifting, I'm doing work, and I'm feeling sore at the end of the day, right? And you want to be able to try and mitigate that and minimize that as much as possible, and help those people to have a better work experience and a better work balance, life balance experience too as well, and not have them feeling so sore at the end of the day that they can't do anything else with their time outside of work. So it's really important to focus on that, and I mean, it's just staggering to hear that number just focused on back injuries alone, which is a lot, could probably be preventable, by putting in safe lifting practices, or putting in exosuits, or something, to be able to help mitigate that ahead of time. So I mean, it's pretty
Mhm.
interesting, and obviously a big issue that you guys have a solution for. So why don't you tell us kind of a little bit about the solution itself? I know you're wearing one
Mhm.
here for people that are watching on video, and tell us a little bit about kind of the product, maybe talk us through it for
Yep.
our audio listeners, and show us, for the video watchers, video listeners, I guess, whichever you want to call them. And tell us too, I guess, as you're doing that, maybe what's different about, because there's other exosuit solutions out there on the market. What's
Mhm.
different about this solution versus maybe some of the others, and what are some of the key features you have?
Absolutely. And as a part of this too, I'll walk through a little bit of like a
Mm,
primer on just back biomechanics and why this is such a pervasive problem. So
sure.
when an individual is, bending and lifting an object, so let's say you're lifting up whatever, a 30-pound box.
Mm,
The reason when you have that 30-pound box here in front of your body, the reason you don't pitch over onto your face is your back muscles are contracting on your spine to help keep your body upright,
mm,
right? But think about it like a lever where your back muscles are much tighter up against your spine than that weight is out in front of you. So even though
mm,
that's a 30-pound box, your back muscles are contracting against your spine with 5 to 10x the force of
mm,
whatever that weight is. So every time you go up and you lift that box, you're getting a huge amount of the strain on the body is actually from your own muscles. And every
mm,
time that happens, there's just a little bit of micro damage that occurs. And so over the course of a 10-hour shift, you're picking 150 boxes an hour. You're going to get a lot of muscle breakdown, which is why people get home exhausted, kind of collapse on the couch, and wake up sore the next day.
mm,
And so overnight, your body's going to start to repair some of that injury. But if that micro damage was higher than your ability to recover, it's going to degrade over time until you get to a point where you have a catastrophic back injury.
Yeah.
And that's true whether you've got good ergonomic lifting form or you've got terrible, stooped posture. It's going to occur slightly different rates between those, but it's still going to be a problem. And so the idea with the exosuit is, hey, can we leverage technology to just take some percent of the load off? We're never going to completely replace the muscles, but effectively think of the exosuit as a pair of artificial back muscles.
Mm.
So on our design, it goes on basically like a small backpack.
Okay.
And then it attaches to the upper thighs. There are basically two thigh sleeves that go on the upper thighs. And
Mm.
then the real functional component is along the back. There are these effectively thick rubber bands. And
Mm.
so when an individual with our exosuit leans forward or goes down into a squat, those bands are stretching along the back and it is acting like a pair of artificial back muscles. So as I go down,
Ah, interesting.
it's gravity is adding energy into that system, and it's offloading me actually on the way down too. And then it stores about 90% of that energy and returns it as you come back out of the squat. So we've got
Mm.
a lot of workers who will say, "Yeah, it feels like somebody's really helping me lift that package up."
Yeah.
And the math, it's about 20 to 40% of the load is removed off the low back muscles. And we've got just loads of scientific laboratory data and even field data demonstrating that.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. And I'll say, like you said, kind of it's an interesting sensation. I'll say when I tried it at the trade show I mentioned, and it does kind of like you feel it like kind of pulling you back into place a little bit, which I guess is that kind of resistance that's supplementing the back muscle with those rubber bands that you mentioned. It's pretty interesting. And it's very lightweight, obviously, and I think that goes
Mhm.
back to the original challenge that your co-founder put out there was give me something that I can wear under my clothes or something, right? That's
Mhm.
not slim profile and things like that. So tell us a little bit about kind of how your product differs from some of the other ones that
Mhm.
are out there on the market, because I've seen a
Yeah.
couple of them, and some of them are very involved and a little bulkier and have all kinds of electronic things going on as well. So talk to us a little bit about some of the differences there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So exoskeleton technology has been around for decades,
Hmm.
but what you'll see is the trend is towards lighter, more comfortable exosuits over time, and
Yeah.
that's really how we've differentiated ourselves. So all different types of exosuits and exoskeletons are providing a similar amount of offloading to the back. To
Mm.
me, that is just table stakes. That's the easy part of this is providing the assistance. The really hard part is putting it into a form factor that a user actually wants to put on
Mm.
every morning.
Right.
And so that means it's got to be super easy to use, fast and quick to put on and adjust. But then it just has to be crazily comfortable, right? You have to be able to basically, uh, it has to be basically transparent for them. So it's got to
Mm.
work in their environment. These are just extremely dynamic jobs. A lot of walking, hopping on and off of forklifts. There's, bending and getting into tight spaces. And so our design approach has been first and foremost getting out of the way of that worker and creating really easy to use lightweight solutions. So the whole exosuit
Mm.
weighs 2.5 pounds. So when you're wearing it, it's like you have an empty backpack
Yeah.
on your back. And then one of our core pieces of technology is a clutching technology that allows you to turn the assistance on and off. So basically, when this is turned on, as I was demonstrating before, as I lean forward, those bands stretch, I get the
Mm.
assistance. But if I want to sit into a forklift, that's going to be annoying, right? It's going to be pulling me
Oh yeah.
back sort of upright as I'm sitting. And so what we do is we basically have a little clutch along the back. So I just flip the switch there,
Mm.
and that basically releases this back part, and this acts like a giant keychain retractor, and it bypasses the bands. So
Ah,
now I have no assistance, but I have no resistance for what I'm doing as well. So now if I need to go upstairs or hop on that forklift, hop into a truck to drive to my next delivery site, completely comfortable to do that. And then when I'm going to lift again, I just flip the switch down and now it's activated. And we can do that with no motors and no batteries. It's basically a simple mechanical switch.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that because I think because that was one thing I was thinking I was going to ask you about is like if
Mm.
as you kind of go in between tasks, like maybe where there's a task that you need to use it, right? You're going to be doing some repetitive lifting, and then there's a task where maybe you're just throwing some labels on boxes or something, and you don't need to use it. Like, do you have to take it on and off, or but it sounds like you're able to just switch that functionality on and off, so you can just continue to go and bounce around, and you don't kind of lose that I guess that productivity of taking it off and putting it back on when you need it again. So very interesting, and I'm curious, from the perspective of putting this out there. I mean, what are some of the kind of reactions from employees and workers who have started to use this? I mean, how do they feel about it? What's some of their feedback?
Yeah, so this is a pretty new technology. And so normally you're going into a cold room, right?
Mm.
And the workers generally start pretty skeptical. What, you're asking
Yeah,
me to put what on? I've never heard of this thing
yeah, yeah.
before. But very quickly, I mean, our communication to them is like, look, we designed this for you. Our
Mm,
goal is to help you live a happier, healthier life and get home at the end of the day and not be as tired. And the key moment is when they put it on for the first time, they do that first squat. And they have the
mm,
same reaction, it sounds like that you had, which is just there's a light bulb moment. And people just say, wow, okay, I
mm,
get it. And I could see how this could be a benefit for me. So that's the initial piece. But then you also have to prove both the management and the user that they can sustain that
mm,
over weeks and over months. And so a key metric for us is just tracking that user adoption over time.
mm.
Will they continue using this day in and day out because they want to, not just because they're forced to utilize the technology?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's interesting, and I imagine, yeah, because it is kind of like it is a light bulb moment. And I'll say like the exosuit, and not for me, like not having used them in the past and then going to try it, I was kind of like, well, like, does this thing like really like assist? Like, what is this gonna feel like? And it does. I mean, it's pretty incredible to be able to experience and see the difference. And I was only trying it at a trade show, but I can only imagine like the difference it'll make you feel over several shifts of utilizing it, and all that repetitive movement and lifting and things like that. So it's very interesting. And I think one thing I want to touch on here is around the idea of trying to figure out how do you calculate an ROI on something like this,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
if there's some warehouse managers or directors or something listening, and they're trying to they like the idea, which I think it's a great idea. I definitely think it is, but how do you justify like the spend on this if you have 50 employees or something that need to utilize it on a daily basis? Because oftentimes it's a little invisible in a sense, right?
Hmm.
To see like what's the actual impact, because you don't necessarily feel that cost of an injury until an injury happens, in a sense, right? So how do you work with companies to try and figure that out, and do some projections to try and understand the ROI this has from like a preventative aspect?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'll touch on just to give people a scope of terms of like prices of this technology.
Sure. Yeah.
Our price point, if you come to like our website, and you just buy one, it's $1,300 a unit.
Mm,
And when you buy it bulk, it usually ends up being closer to 1,000, $1,100 per unit.
mm,
One of the other benefits with the approach we've taken to the development of this technology is it's textile based for the most part, and that's part of
mm,
us trying to make this simpler and lighter weight and more comfortable. But the side benefit is because you've removed all that bulk and mechanical components, our cost of goods are a lot lower. And so our price point, compared to a lot of the other products on the market, you're talking 3 to 10x lower price point
mm.
for the product. So it's a little bit easier for us to get over those ROI hurdles.
Yeah.
So when we talk to clients, though, there's three key metrics they need to think about, and we have a ROI calculator on our website. And we do a lot of discussions with our clients, like they need to be able to enter their own data. So the
Mm,
first is looking at injury reduction data. And so if you have a lot of strains and sprains, medical claims, generally you're talking 30, 40 grand for a
mm,
back injury. So I've had a lot of clients say, hey, I can pretty much outfit my whole, one of my DCs with this. And if I
yeah.
save an injury or two a year, it kind of pays for itself. But again, to your point, it's kind of invisible in a way, and you have to track that over a long period of time to really quantify that data. The second is around employee retention, which is another thing you can monitor, but can have a lot of confounders as well. The
Mm,
third, and really the clearest area, an area we've been focusing on a lot lately, is around productivity gains.
mm,
And this was not at all where we started. We started when we launched our first generation of the product in 2020 saying, yeah, we don't want to talk about productivity at all. Like, we're talking to safety professionals. This is injury reduction. Let's focus on that. But as we followed the science, what we found was that the offloading that we were doing of the back meant that even with additional reps, you can maintain the same level of safety improvements while boosting productivity. And
mm,
that also aligned with the survey data we were getting back from our users and with our clients. And so what we hear as they've utilized this for, usually it's a 6 to 8 week long, where we're doing baseline surveys and then we're capturing data every 2 weeks. We see that workers tell us that work is 30% easier in the
mm.
exosuit, and they're seeing a reduction in pain and discomfort in the low back by 40%. And they also see
Wow.
reductions in pain in the upper back and the knees and the hips as well. So it is working. And then more recently, we've been doing some productivity studies, and we're seeing that the workers still report those benefits, but they're actually picking more. And
Mm.
so this is something we'll be releasing in early 2024. So I can't give you any more statistics on that just yet, but
Oh,
keep an eye
okay.
out. It's on the way.
All right, little tease there, definitely. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting because it is a great way to approach it. I mean, I think, like you said, like from a safety aspect, like you have to be, really kind of tracking that stuff and understanding, your safety patterns over time and doing some root cause analysis to really figure out, like what are my biggest, injury problems. And, typically it is like back and lifting associated, but you have to have kind of those numbers to understand like what's been the impact in the past, and how do we reduce that impact with a solution like this. But I think that productivity approach is such a great way too, because you see, and it makes total sense actually as you're talking through it, that you would see a productivity increase because the worker is more comfortable, right? So they're saving energy. They're not taking a step back and walking around in a circle for a second to try and fight through some pain or something they might be feeling, or soreness or anything like that. So it's you really see that gain. So I think it's really a great way to approach it from both that safety and productivity aspect, to be able to justify it, and maybe define it to your higher level decision maker, who maybe really is not thinking about the injuries or too involved on the floor type of things, to really understand that impact. So really, really interesting stuff. And definitely interested to see what this little tease is going to be in early 2024 that you mentioned too. So I mean, with that being said, I mean, what does kind of the future of HeroWear look like?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of growth right now.
Mhm,
That's a lot of work with our clients where we are expanding into additional facilities and outfitting larger and larger percentages of their facilities. So here at HeroWare, we're doing a lot in building our infrastructure, everything from manufacturing capacity to, we're actually moving next week to a much larger facility to
mm,
handle the pick, pack, and fulfillment. And we're building out our client services teams, who are the teams that kind of go out and help our clients in terms of training and fitting their employees, because there's some on the ground training that's needed with this type of technology until it starts to get normalized within your facility.
mm,
So that's a key piece for us. The other is we're going to continue to go deep in these productivity studies. And that's
Yeah.
something we're working on a few different partnerships right now with clients with data sharing back and forth to really prove that over time. That's really exciting. And then just getting prepped for the conference season next year. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see you again. We'll be at
Yeah.
Manifest, we'll be at Modex, and that's definitely I'd encourage everybody if they've got any interest to like swing by the booth and
Yeah.
try on the exosuit, because that's always the key, is like actually feeling this thing and recognizing, oh, I could see how this could work in my facility.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely, and
And
I
then
agree. Yeah, because that was kind of like for me when I tried it on. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, like I see how this can work. Yeah, you were gonna say
yeah,
something?
and then the final thing is just long term. Uh, it's a new product category, so it's how do we
Mm,
normalize this technology, right? And the analogy I always use is something similar to like power tools. You know, back in the day,
mm,
everything was done by hand. It was hammers and nails, and you know you're twisting that screwdriver by hand to drive that screw. And there was introduction of these power tools, which initially were used large scale B2B, and you both had safety gains and you had productivity gains that were associated with that technology. And over time, cost comes down, gets normalized, more widely distributed, and now everybody's got a power tool, you know,
yeah,
in their garage. Well, you know, that's something we envision, a world where everybody's got an exosuit in their garage, because
yeah,
when you're moving, like this afternoon, I'm going to go out with the team and we're going to go out to the food bank and we're going to be throwing around boxes of frozen food. Well, I'm going to be
yeah.
wearing my exosuit and I'm not going to be sore tomorrow.
Yeah. Interesting, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a great thing and definitely, I can see it very widespread like you mentioned, being, one day in everybody's garage and something they use just around the house to do lifting certain things and all those different types of things. So very interesting to learn more about this and kind of dive into the back story, I guess. No pun intended there, but and learn more about how this is impacting employees and from the better and creating that better work environment for them. So Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I will definitely be looking forward to seeing you guys over at Manifest and Modex and maybe trying this thing on again potentially. But if people are interested in learning more about HeroWear now, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, best way is just going directly to our website. It's just HeroWearExo.com.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well so people can easily find it. So, Mark, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Excellent. Great chatting with you, Kevin.